we need to have the infrastructure that we can refuel our cars with. So it's the manufacturers that are not agreeing on a standard way.
We'll put that point a bit. Lord Deben, I mean, is there an attempt to try and get standardized charging points on cars?
Well, I'm not sure it's as bad as the lady says. That we don't think there's going to be any difficulty in the United Kingdom. The charging points will, in fact, be able to be used by all the electric cars that we've got on the market at the moment, and I think people are taking that seriously. The bit that we haven't got enough advance with is the idea that we ought to be using the car battery as a means of putting energy into the grid when the car is actually at home, so that we actually get a circular system. And we are not as far ahead with that than I think we could be or would be if we were actually getting on with it. So for me, that's the bit we have to get right.
I spoke to a gentleman in Orkney quite recently who sells second-hand electric cars up there, and he's been working out of his bedroom, and he decided he's going to build an office. But he's not going to connect it to the grid. He's going to drive to his office and connect his Nissan Leaf to the office and run the office off the car. Because something like a Tesla Wall's 10 kilowatt hours, whereas the Nissan Leaf's 22 kilowatt hours, and he will have enough energy to run his office all day and then drive home again, connect his car to his wind turbine and recharge it. That's a circular economy. Roseanna, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think I'm not sure it's as bad either as you imagine. I mean, Scotland has already got quite a good network of vehicle charging points, and that's going to be massively expanded in the coming years in order to ensure that people in more rural areas are able to access the benefit of this, although I already know people in rural areas with electric vehicles, so it's already beginning. I think we would all like to see technological change faster, but there's every indication that the car manufacturers are getting there themselves anyway. So, you know, I'm hopeful that some of these problems will get ironed out and we don't end up in a, what was it, VHS versus Betamax war. That's probably not something that anybody under 50 is going to remember either.
One other issue about the charging points, because I mean, I've driven, like, we took a car around the NC 500, an electric car. 2 occasions we couldn't get the charging points to work, not because the charging points were broken, but because to identify us needed good internet connection. And the internet connection was so poor, the charging point wouldn't acknowledge our existence. So, you know, that's...
Yeah, there are all sorts of technological challenges, and, you know, I think there's a little bit of ingenuity and creativity has got to come into this, and it seems to me that when you put in vehicle charging points, we should maybe be at the connectivity people to actually make sure that that's where the advances there go as well.
Okay. Another question, please. That lady's sitting right there.
Hi, I'm Sarah Beatty-Smith from WWF Scotland. It's really heartening to hear so much emphasis on climate change throughout this conference so far, and particularly to hear from Nicola Sturgeon this morning saying that there will be an early decision on setting a target for net zero emissions with the Scottish Government. I wondered whether you're able to say a little more, Cabinet Secretary or Lord Deben, about what that early decision depends on, and whether there are things that people in this room or my own organisation can do that decision to give you the confidence to set an early and ambitious world-leading target.
It's a wonderful idea, and I think we in Scotland want to be as ambitious as we possibly can be. One of the things that I would be looking for is to see what the practical path to that would be. And that's just at the moment the slightly difficult area of the conversation, because 2050 is not actually that long away. And if we set a target like that in the legislation that will become an act in early 2019, within a year or two we'll have to have a climate change plan which is beginning to work out the intermediate progress to that. Right now it's hard to see what that would look like. So I would ask all of those who want to see that target to give us as much help as they can to understand how in practical terms we can actually achieve that. And can I just make one point that niggles me, and I've already made it in conversation with Lord Deben. There are some countries who are making great play of the fact that they are going to move to this, and I think Sweden is one of them. But Sweden uses international carbon credits. It buys international carbon credits to make up its targets, and we don't. So I'm anxious that everybody understands that we're all looking at the same thing across the board when we're setting these targets.
Well, I second that. I think that the first thing is that the Scottish Government already has more ambitious targets than the rest of the United Kingdom. And the Climate Change Committee has been very tough with the Scottish Government, saying that at the moment there isn't a programme to reach those. And that is perfectly true. We honour the target, we want the target to be reached, but at the moment there isn't a programme which will reach it. My first priority would be to make sure the programme that reached that level was actually going to work. The second issue is the issue of measurement. And we really do have to overcome these two problems. One is that there are some people who, in the rest of the world who measure differently. I discovered, for example, when I was a minister, that the reason that Denmark appeared to have cleaner seas, according to the figures, although they were entirely eutrophied, was because they didn't measure the sea, they measured the water coming out of the sewers into the sea, so they avoided any measurement of the stuff that came off the land. Whereas we were all measuring the sea, so we could quite see that that's why we didn't look as if we were doing very well. So measurement and comparability of measurement is absolutely crucial. And the other bit is that these standards and targets are bound to change as the science gets more accurate, as different areas are brought in, whether it's peat or whether it's other ways of measuring the impacts of forests, those will change. And the Scots, who have bravely taken an annual target, that makes it particularly difficult to find a sensible way by which they aren't, in which people are not confused, not because you haven't achieved things, but because the actual measurements have changed. And we've got to find a good way of ensuring that everybody understands the realities, and so when there's a success, we can celebrate it, and it isn't some kind of accountancy trick.
Just one last point. Coming out of this so far, and I know we've barely started the conference, but I mean, it's local solutions to local problems. It's putting yourself at the center of the map, as I said earlier. And if you go to somewhere like the island of Egg, they all have energy monitors in the house, and it's kind of like an island pastime. See who can use the least energy in a day. And it's not wonderful. The wonderful thing about it, it's not hair shirt, but you'll meet people in the post office and they will literally say, I only used such and such yesterday, etc. And it's a very easy, simple way of seeing what your personal impact is. Having said that, it's easier to do in an island than it is on the mainland to a certain extent because you don't have the communication networks which add to it. But it's a good idea. Can I just ask you to thank Lord Deben and Roseanna Cunningham one last time, please? Thank you.